Good morning, Monica. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am fantastic. And before I have so many things I want to say already, but before I jump into that, I will acknowledge that I am Jen Grace and I'm the founder and CEO of Publisher Purpose. And you, Monica, are I feel like a repeat author, if you will, and I feel like kind of one of our earlier authors. And so I'm excited to kind of talk to you today because we're talking about your second edition, which is amazing that you have a second edition and it's gorgeous on top of it. So, can we start high level of just sharing just a little bit of who you are?
So thank you for having me, and thank you for help publishing my book that I can now geek out and talk about. Really excited. My name is Monica Kang. I'm an entrepreneur, author, and speaker, but most importantly, just really a person who cares about how do we design a workplace for all. So at Innovators Box, the company that I founded and the CEO of Innovators Box, we are focused on people development and the workplace and how do we do that creatively. And so I do a lot of culture, leadership, team development with creativity, which often means doing a lot of workshops, speaking, program development, training, and really sitting in a lot of conversations of like, how do we help leaders and teams really rethink what it means to build a workplace for all. This year in particular, we've been expanding more on how we communicate that even more creatively through a lot of creative production as well, which I'm excited to speak about. But that was part of the investment of like, I think Rethink Creativity that I published with you a few years ago needed a little update. And while I've got a chance to reflect on that when we were doing the Korean edition translation, that's where I realized that, hey, I think this is time. We've had to be reinventing so much in the world. There's lessons that I think it's really good to see that we're finally letting go of, like what we thought was 9 to 5, like what it means to actually study performance at work, what it means to actually show up to work. That I felt like I want to make sure we give another touch. And so that's why this is one of the things I was excited to do this year.
All right. So for just a timeline standpoint, so the first edition came out in 2018, and then you moved into a Korean translation. Yep. And now you have the second edition because of just the amount of ways that you had to think through translating from the English to the Korean edition, right? So there's just a lot of things and nuances that change. So when was the Korean? What time frame did the Korean edition come out?
Pandemic really impacted me in several ways, including the book and the work. For context,
Yeah.
who don't know a little bit about our work used to be everything in person, and so that included, even as an author, relying on in-person tours and doing that. And so, even actually for the Korean book, originally we were planning to have it out. Early last year, which whenever you're watching this is like early 2020. Of course, the pandemic changed its mind and what was possible. And the publisher on Korea side is like, hey, we want to find the right publishing time. And so we kind of pushed it. We were waiting and then we waited. I'm like, okay, we waited enough. And so then we published it finally in November 2020. So
Yeah.
that's where, but then from that experience, I think, Jen, to your question of why I felt the urge of like, should I go revisit the English one came because the response that we got from the Korean edition, people were just expressing. I know this actually led more people to reaching out and asking, like, oh my gosh, if this is what you saw, can you help me? But really expressing, like, wow, I just really wish this book existed earlier because I thought I was the crazy one asking for these things or like wanting a workplace for all. And you help communicate that I'm not crazy. Like, this is something that I can ask for. This is something I can design. I just need to know how. I just need help and I need practice. And I think that humanizing encouraged people, which encouraged me to know what can I do to make it even more accessible, which means taking another look in the English version.
Yeah, yeah. And I love, honestly, there's so many things that I love about just the differences between the first and second edition because sometimes with books, there's very minimal tweaks between a first and a second edition. Yours are it's like a dramatic leap for the better. And I think it's amazing because the first one was amazing. And I tell people all the time, it's one of the most creative books, which is, and no pun intended, but it's one of the most creative books. And you are one of the most creative people that I know. So I love just kind of like the witnessing of your elevation from 1 to 2. I think that's just a really beautiful thing.
Thank you. And I think the thing that humbled me is going back to probably folks who's watching, whether you're writing your book or, thinking about it or just supporting, that's great too, all of the above. One of the things that I think was really hard in the decision making, which I'm really great to work with Jen, who helps make this a little bit easier, is just like figuring out what do we let go of and what do we keep. And so it's one thing to actually not only like almost rewrite. I had actually had some friends who's like, hey, if you're going to actually literally double the amount of writing and it's like there's so much new content and new stuff, like why can't you just write book 2 instead of like second edition? But I felt like it wouldn't do justice. And part of the joy as a result is like, for instance, like I think book 1 like has the joy of actually, these are some of my original paper artwork, which is like I literally plucked out origami paper in Korean growing up. That's like part of the paper pieces. And so these are my original artwork that I've included, which was really fun to design. And of course, we have the note sections. But I knew that because with more case studies and, examples and really visualizing culture, I kept having conversation how people found it really hard to visualize what does a good culture look like. And so I wanted to challenge. And so now when we think about self-reflection, we have these visuals of like, okay, what does it look like to rethink self-reflection? And again, significantly more story examples. I bring cases of these. I'm so glad I found a great illustrator who could understand the vision and the work. And yeah, I just hope that people feel invited to play. So often I feel reading, it's like, oh, I have to do this, or like I have to do this culture thing. But like, how can we make this play enjoyable and something that feels like a treat?
Yeah. All right. There's 2 things that are completely disconnected that I want to ask you about. So I'll do one and then we can get to the other. So what I find really interesting in what you just said is that you could have come out with a second book and you chose proactively to go back and update the first one. That says so much about who you are and kind of the mindset that you come from, because so many people would want the vanity of being able to say that they've written 2 books. Whereas you took the time to go back and really methodically rework that first one for the benefit of everybody, rather than just having like a second one. Because you're right, it probably would have been easier, honestly, to just do a second one, right?
We're actually having behind the scene logistical.
Yeah, logistically, it probably would have been a lot easier. But I just think that that speaks to who you are so much in terms of not having your ego being the thing that's leading the conversation. Like you are so people focused and mindful of who you're working with and who you're serving. And I think that's just a really kind of awesome thing. Did you ever have like a thought of like, maybe I should make it a second book? Or was it always just like, it has to just be a second edition?
Thank you for sharing that. And yes, second edition, that part I never hesitated. I think the only decision that was hard was like how much more crazy and like more new things that we're putting in. how much newness is okay? And Jen will let me know, is this really a new book or is it still second edition? Because I think when I write my second book, because I know I will probably write second, third, other books, I think it has to be a different topic, and I think are like completely something different. And so there's a lot of different ideas I've been incubating. Actually, I've had a whole series of interviews that I was researching a while back. I'm really kind of breaking down people's perspective of the workplace. And so you'll still hear perspectives of workplace, innovation, creativity, storytelling from a lot of my books that I will continue to write. And I have a whole other category that I'm about to release in children's book as well. But I felt like it wouldn't be fair for me to just simply say it's second when the heart of it is connected. And so if I write something different, that's when I feel it's a second book.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because it's almost like, I don't know. And I actually think that I did this wrong myself, which is what made me kind of pick up on what you were saying, is that when I wrote my first one back in 2013, when I think it was like the third one in, it felt like, and none of them were even publicly available for people to buy anymore. But it's because I feel like I just kind of took the easy way out of kind of just making something that should have been a second edition into a separate book. And I don't think it was as successful because I didn't approach it the right way. So I love that you just kind of like instinctively knew that from the onset, which I think is fantastic.
Thank you. I had friends who discouraged me from doing it. So Yeah, it's I think and then looking out for the right reason, because honestly on the back end, as many authors are still probably making that decision and determining, is any book publishing process, even just writing, publishing, editing, it's a lot, not just in time, investment, and resources. So it is a difficult decision. So I do want to make that it's not easy. At times, maybe it could be that it is a second book, but the key is at the end of the day, like what's the intention? And I think that's one of the reasons why I love working with you, because you're always about really making it purposeful, which is the whole reason why you put that word in your work of the company. And so thank you for also helping us, making sure that we are really thinking about the book's purpose.
Yeah, of course. And you actually just teed up the other thing that I was going to say beautifully and don't even realize it. So, your book is a teaching tool, right? Like, that's kind of how I see it. And you had kind of skimmed across this already of how just because it's a business book doesn't mean it has to be boring in black and white. So, I would love to just kind of get an inside lens of how you think to and it's rethink wasn't even I wasn't even trying to make a pun there, but just to like how your brain operates to have added such a level of creativity to how this book is structured. And just as a prop, here is my coffee mug this morning, matches all of the graphics of the inside of your second edition, which is fantastic and awesome. I say, yeah, you are such a master at the creative side of things, obviously. So, like what was the purpose and the intention at the onset? So, even thinking of the first book of deciding, because you're are they like what are those? Is it like paper? I keep thinking paper mache, but it's like you're because I've always was always so fascinated then about how you because that must have taken forever because there's a lot of them in there. And so like you already had come out of the gate making it a very non-traditional looking business book, and it's obviously been successful for you to do the second edition. So like what was the I guess the purpose around how you were approaching it?
Thank you for asking. And Uh, I think an example is actually going through behind the scenes of how the nitty gritty stuff happened. And this is kind of a reflection of, even though it might sound ironic for somebody who does creativity innovation work, yes, I do love art. You see my magnets of art right there. I do like color. I do like flow. And I also love structure. And this is, I think, part of the reason why how I make my decision, how I enjoy and thrive and look out for the opportunities to rethink, is because of my joy in liking loving both. And I say that as an intangible example. I knew that there was a going back to even like book one, there was a timeline that I wanted to meet. Timeline and publishing timeline, and when I needed to make sure I get the materials to Jen and the team, because they're gonna be like, okay, Monica, you said you wanted by then. It's not ready yet. So then I backtrack. That's my structure brain thinking of like, okay, what are the things I could do differently? Because one, my joy is I want to do things differently because that's just what makes it more fun. And if I'm going to
Mhm.
write a book anyway, I want to make it fun. Like that was the intention. But then I knew the boundary was like, I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to like overspend my budget. I'm not going to like over
Mhm.
like try to spend time and like stress myself out. So like, what's the way I would do something that's like fun? And right around that time, I was looking for my self care and like, I grew up both in the States and Korea. And when I spent some time in Korea in elementary school, one of the things that you all learn is like, just learning how to like build um, origami. And so I used to actually always have those when I get stressed, just to like fold the little cranes, I guess, yeah,
Yeah.
cranes, and birds and out at home. And then I was like, I guess unconsciously, I forget what the occasion was, but when we were thinking about like, I need creative illustrations, but I felt like I needed to do something for myself, but like I didn't feel comfortable painting. And I think I was like ripping off those paper. I was like, oh, what if I just like put these together and created something? So I did one and I liked it so much that I'm like, oh, if that's possible, then this is something that I already have the resources at home. This is the timeline. I'm not going to stress about it. Let me just create a couple things. Let
Yeah.
me have fun with it. Worst case, I will use it for marketing. And then graciously, Jen said, oh, that's a cool idea. We will make it happen. And she took care of my pictures that I took from screen that I felt was hard to edit into seamlessly beautiful artwork. So for
Mhm.
me, I think the balance of both, but one, giving myself the joy of like, I know I want to do it because I want to make it fun is part of the drive. And I think that
Mhm.
was similar in the second edition because I felt like, okay, it actually really started not because I wanted to have original artwork, but because of something else, which is like I've been getting all into audios and podcasts this year. We launched Innovator Box Studios, which we have a
Yeah.
whole new set of podcasts, which Jen was also a guest. And we have Dear Workplace, Curious Monica, and um, Innovator Box Studios has music. We also do like online games. And so that opened my eye to like animation is really powerful. Like I love watching visuals, beautiful things. What would it look like if I got a chance to create? So we actually started, I was looking for somebody to create a 9-minute animation of the first introduction audio from my audiobook, which is also available on Audible. That we have original music and production, but the illustrations were so pretty, and I realized, oh my gosh, it doesn't make sense to like match now these images that yes, I'm proud I did last time, but I think it needs some upgrade. And so I asked her to create it. And that's where I realized, okay, if we're creating these images, then we got to create update the cover. And so maybe it's TMI for some people. It's like, okay, that's too much operation detail. But I wanted to share a real insight in that the decision making was again one, having the clarity that like I did wanted to do something different, I did wanted to have fun with it, but two, I had a strict boundary that I gave myself of when I wanted to want it by, what's the timeline, what's the
Mhm.
purpose, and three, most importantly, what's the whole experience, not just for me, but for the readers later on to feel really like a treat. And so that's how it came together. And so these are the three characters that will be throughout actually all our brand. Curiosity is the monkey, rabbit is creativity, and then owl is courage.
Mm.
Uh,
Love it.
I hope that this would encourage people to feel it's a little bit
Mhm.
easier to find your friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I love that, you have courage, curiosity plus courage equals creativity. Like, so you have a whole kind of framework for all of this, which is so awesome. And once again, not surprising. So I'm curious then, how did the pandemic impact your work? Because I would imagine that, because there's so much information that's coming out in terms of how many people have left the jobs they were in, they're transitioning to something completely different, they're doing something, they're realizing that life is too short and they want to work on things that they're more passionate about, and so that ties into so much of what you do as a company. So like I guess, yeah, how has the pandemic changed what you're up to?
First, it was scary because, like many businesses, for us, we had to really literally rethink how we do everything. As I mentioned a little bit a moment ago, everything that we did was in person. My team is 100% remote. And so I have team members already around the country and then around the world, because of we're focused more on like finding the right talent. We don't really care about where they're located at. Uh, but for clients, it's all in person. So workshops, even consultations, even like strategy sessions, like those were all designed in person. And I did not ever see myself knowing that I could do this online. I felt like, well, I have all these, going back to Jen, your question of like, how do I usually rethink? Because I want to bring play. My goal is always when I used to do in-person workshops, like, okay, since this is what people are used to, how can I like bring this familiar setting to see something different? So I would purposely put Play-Dohs and then have them do like activities. They were like, they would at first feel like, oh my gosh, this is so silly. I don't understand why we're doing it. And then that's the very moment they think of new ideas and like, whoa, I haven't thought of this, which is the whole reason why, going back to your question, why I did the slightly different design in the book. But I can't do that anymore. And so it was really hard at the beginning. I honestly lost 90% of our original clients because everything was in person and we could not do that anymore. And it was supposed to be our biggest year because we were, doing more projects. We had more global demand and I didn't know. And so that's where I really had to rethink and ask myself, why does Innovators Box really exist? Like, why did I really write Rethink Creativity? And I realized it was because at the end of the day, we exist because I knew how it felt like to not be happy at work. I knew how it felt like when I was crying to work, so depressed. Um, unappreciated, even though they said they were, and felt stuck in a career that I thought I loved very much. And it took me a long way to realize that, hey, it's actually me that I had to change my way of thinking. Yes, the workplace is also a place that could help me feel safe, but I need to first believe in myself and reframe and really believe in my creativity and shifting that way of thinking of curiosity and even more. Remembering that North Star, Jen, helped me then remind myself, wow, just like me struggling how I'm figuring out in the pandemic, there is everyone else, not just my clients, but everyone else around the world is trying to ask these questions. So that's where I started humbling. I uploaded this very awkward video that is still on YouTube where I'm like, okay. And like, you'll see how the backdrop of my images keep changing because now I keep upgrading each time I recorded a video. I would test out my recording. I mean, folks, like for those who are Asian, you might resonate with this even more, but like my parents would send me messages like, Monica, please don't record anymore because that was such an embarrassing video. You had so many ums. You, you said so many things that was awkward. Like, did you see yourself? You're frowning. I'm like, thanks, mom and dad. Like, they
Yeah.
said it out of care. But that's how
Yeah.
awkward I was on camera because I wasn't used to it. But I
Yeah.
realized if I don't keep showing up, sharing resources, hey, I'm still figuring out as well. But these are ways how we can rethink about culture, people, how do we like build a safe space online. And as I was interviewing, creating content and resources, we've learned how to not only, of course, do the workshops and facilitations online, became a trainer and now training other people become facilitators, and also actually doing even more projects. So this year we're even busier than before, and have more clients where we do, year-round projects where we're really there kind of back and support and holding them grounded during this time because the pandemic has not been easy. And so, yeah, just thought I'll take a little step back and share those because I know in the front end right now, I just came off another meeting where I was speaking at The Economist, and it feels like, oh my gosh, that all sounds like you keep going up. I'm like, just to make it clear, like there's been a lot of ups and downs, and it's remembering that it's a journey. That's I think what grounds us, and I think the secret sauce of actually encouraging me to constantly rethink. And
Mm.
I hope that the next time somebody sees us, it's like, no, I'm going to rethink even more. Like that's what worked yesterday, but what else can work tomorrow?
Mm. And I think that there's so much of what you're saying, I think, gets to the root difference between people who are entrepreneurs and people who own businesses, because those are not always the same types of people. And so much of what you're saying is such the actual entrepreneurial mindset, not just the, I started a business because I didn't like my job and now I'm like kind of just doing the motions and kind of doing the things. Whereas entrepreneurs are always going for that next level, but also realizing that it is a constant up and down and sideways. And like you were just saying, like you were just speaking at The Economist, like that's a huge deal, right? But at the same time, instead of just saying like, hey, I just did this thing, you're also humble enough to acknowledge like, and yesterday was a shit show, like, so there's such a like a just a refreshing kind of feel to that, because we put forth what we want people to see, and they don't necessarily see those moments where we're having just a not so great day or a not so great week or not so great month, and or the whole of 2020 perhaps. So it's just kind of really interesting, and I love that you're just always so kind of forthcoming with that information, because I think it helps inspire other people who are in that phase where they might see what you're up to and be inspired to kind of do something similar. So there's just like a nice role model aspect to all of this too.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being that person as well, and co-creating that safe space.
Yeah, I feel like we are partners in that front. Is there anything else that you would like to mention that I did not ask you before we conclude?
Mm, yeah, I think well, I know we covered a lot of grounds. And for those who are watching, whether you are curious because you're writing your book or looking to write your book or reading Rethink Creativity, I hope you recognize that you're at the right place where you are. Whether this feels like a foreign concept or feel like this is exactly what you already do, just know that in both circumstance, you can always do more. But first, you have to enjoy it. You have to believe in yourself. And so, and if it sounds hard, just give yourself a pat in the back and know that, hey, if this was that easy and overnight, like we wouldn't be in a crisis call, like not all of us believing if we are creative or not. And so give
Yeah.
yourself some grace. Know that wherever you are in the journey, your work and voice matters so much. We've been also, and this was actually, Jen, to add on that, one of the intention why I wanted to invest in more resources for this round. And so if you go to actually rethinkcreativity.co, I haven't updated my personal website yet. So like if you go, that will be updated too, but rethinkcreativity.co, I'll put that in the chat as well later in the comments. But there you can find a lot of free resources, rethinkcreativity.co slash, oh, thank you, slash free. That's where you will find worksheets, culture checklists, because I understand, while I do have a lot of question prompts, and again, I wanted you to have a whole experience. Use those. Please use those. Don't feel like you're alone. And of course, if you have questions, reach out to me. Let me know. There's other worksheets and tools that I have at Innovators Box for free. There's also games and tools. Game.innovatorsbox.com is a free. We digitized our entire game, so that way you can use for free. And so I just want to emphasize again that, reading the book and joining Rethink Creativity is just the start. Hopefully that you feel encouraged to know that your voice matters, your work matters, and we need more people like you who are rethinking creativity around the world and what you do. So thank you. Let me know, and please share me the love. Let me know. Tag us. Share. Would love to come speak and share in your communities as well. But look forward to, and thank you for taking the time. And check out our
Yeah.
audiobook, please. We put a lot of fun.
Yes. Please fan your visual of all of your books, if you don't mind. So there are, both the English and Korean editions are available wherever you can buy your book. I love the just kind of evolution of it, because you can actually see the actual visual evolution when you have the three of them like that, which is so awesome. So yes, you can buy it wherever you please. Monica was also a guest on the Publisher Purpose Invisible Stories podcast, where you share a little bit more detail about your personal journey. So if anyone is interested in that, I've been on your podcast. So you have a lot of content. You just hosted an event last week that I was part of. And so if you're looking for just kind of information, Monica is a powerhouse of constant activity that is very thoughtful. So I strongly encourage you to check her and Innovators Box out on all of the different social media platforms, because she's everywhere and doing some awesome things. Thank you so much, Monica. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.